the underside of the van. Now I see it and hear it all the time on Facebook, people want to know how to get rid of the underbody deadener. So, you know, on a Ford, on this era Ford, it's a bit here and there where it is and how much of it. And it's a bitumen based sealer. And over the years I've done a few cars. Most of our jobs now, we normally go out to the sandblaster, garnet blast. But because this is my own and my own time is my own time, I've decided that when I've got a bit of time, or if Steve's got a bit of time in the workshop, we just get it off ourselves. So I've been messing about with different things to be able to show you what I think might be the go. And initially I tried the butane torch, and that works good, but it's not necessarily cost effective, and it's a bit messy and you've got a naked flame. Also tried the heat gun, and that works pretty good, and you need different sorts of scrapers. This one is one I've had for a very long time, and it actually, you did drag that rather than push it, and that's probably been the most effective, especially with the curved edge on it. So you'd sort of get to this point where you can get a lot of that bulk off, and like to do that inner guard there, you're probably looking at half an hour to get it to that point. But obviously it's not paintable at that stage. But I found by accident the other day that I dropped some paint stripper when I was working on the outside, and it landed on the inside of the car and landed on some of this bitumen. And it was interesting just that it just fell off. Now this has only been on here about 5-10 minutes. You can see that, how easy that is. So that's just taking all of that bulk off. Now, the paint stripper, this is just poly strip from Bunnings. It's about 80 bucks for a 4 litre, and you'd probably use 1 or 2 of those to do the whole underside. But for me, at my age especially, that's cost effective for me, because I don't really want to be under here pushing and pulling, trying to get all of that off. So you can just see how that's working, and where we did a little bit earlier, it's now taking off the paint as well. Now, it can get a bit messy. We've just got some cardboard on the floor, protect the paint on the floor, and then these little brushes, I buy them from Bunnings as well. They're pretty good to get in and around the curves. And then to get rid of the mess, I've just been using some paper towel, where you can just go like that, with a set of gloves on of course, but because I'm filming I didn't do it, and you get that nice clean metal. Now, I'll keep the camera rolling as we get a bit more done. So we did this one last week, and that was just one application, and we were still learning what we're doing. So we'll persevere a bit longer, and if I work out any more tricks, I'll make sure I film it and show you what we're up to. Righto, so that's a couple of hours. Ended up the process just using paint stripper. Take the paint stripper off with a plastic scraper, something like this. Find that better than the steel scraper. So paint stripper, take the bulk off, put a bit of paint stripper back on, and then go with a wire brush. So we're just using like a couple of different size wire brushes just by hand, and just sort of mix it around to scratch it up a bit. You can sort of see here where the wire brush has just been cleaning it off. And then once you get the bulk of that off with the scraper, then just using some mineral terps, so just some mineral turpentine. So because it's like bitumen based, the terps just eats away, and it seems to work really well with the stripper as well. Once we wiped it over with that with the brush, I was trying to paper towel, but some towels definitely work better. So I actually had a couple of old sheets here that I used, and they're way better than the paper towel. And then obviously we've got some gloves and protection gear and all that sort of stuff. So down the bottom here you can see there's still the rust there, so I thought I'll just grab the Scotch-Brite on the grinder to have a bit of a look. And you can see there where I've been grinding away there with the sander, so that's what's going to be needed down the bottom. But I think there's value in getting all of the paint and all of the bitumen off it before you try and go with those machines. So that's just using one of those strip discs like that. But to do the whole car like that, they tend to block up, and if you're using those strip discs anywhere near these corners, like this sort of stuff, it just tears them apart, and they're like 20 bucks each or something. So I think the way we're going, if you're going to do it at home, is not a bad way to go, and it's really nice to see that bare metal look and where the welds are and all that sort of stuff looks really cool. So we'll just keep playing with that. Like I said, that was about 2 hours, 2 man hours in total to get it to that stage. Righto, panel vans. It's really interesting when you get a project like this that you always end up with more than one job at a time, because you can see in the background we've sort of started stripping that, and I'm doing a video on that. But the reason I've grabbed the tailgate is I've got Darren for a couple of days again next week, and I want him to take the skin off this, and we can do a video on removing the skin and all those sorts of things. So sometimes you just got to have multiple jobs on the go, and the same applies, you know, if you've got stuff ready, you can send it off to the chrome platers, whatever it is, so that when you get to need those parts, you're not sort of in a rush trying to put pressure on people to do it. So this looks to be the original tailgate. It's pretty good, except it's got this big dent, which once I get the skin off, I'll be able to do that. And it's got some pretty good rust areas here that I'm hoping won't be right through. Now you can buy these tailgates repo, the skin. I think you might even be able to buy a gate. But what we'll do is we'll paint strip the outside, have a look at that rust. If it's not too bad, then we're going to take the skin off, repair it and put it back on, and that'll make some good viewing as well, and we can just make sure everything's good. So we'll jump into that, get it stripped before Darren's here, and then he can do the job of getting it all apart. Paint stripper. So I'm just using polystrip to, you know, the old Bunnings again, but if you go to your automotive paint store, there's a whole lot of different ones. I've got one I just remembered that I was going to, someone sent me to try, and I forgot I could have used it on this. But once again, cheap paint brushes. If you put a good liberal coating on there, and then if you grab some plastic, now you can use Glad Wrap. This is the plastic we use in the spray booth for masking. That enables you to put it on, put the plastic on, and it stops it evaporating and lets it seep in and work. And I believe by the look of it, this is working pretty darn good, because when I did the outside of the van, some of the parts that had been repainted didn't strip very well, and the ones that hadn't been stripped awesome. And you can see there now, that's just one coat, and it's pretty much completely off. And you can see there was obviously from that dent a bit of a crack in the paint, and you can see the moisture's got inside and started rusting. So I'm not going to undo it all now, because once it dries it gets hard to get off, but we'll leave the camera running probably. That's how paint stripper should work on an old car. The trick is put plenty on at the start, put your plastic on. Actually, I'll keep going. So look at that, it's just fallen off. And I love this stage, because if you have a look here, you can see at the factory, when they've put the skin on or they've done the lead work on the car, you can see the sanding marks here from, you know, it's probably Scotch-Brite or a little bit coarser. You can actually see where they've run that along the edge there. I'll be really interested to see how these big rust spots are. So you can see there, That's what I call rust that's crawling. See how it's growing? So it's busted through the paint and it started rusting, and now that rust is slowly working its way out. So we'll get the wire wheel on there and see how that's going. And that's pretty much all going to fall off there, which is awesome. So we'll get all that off, and then we might put some on the other side and do the edge, and then that'll make the process of getting that skin off a whole lot easier when you can see what you're doing. Good job. That's like magic. Now without that plastic on there, you see that bit's not quite through, so it either didn't have enough or it starts to dry out, and once it starts to dry, it sticks back on again. So that there, I would say, is not enough stripper. So you need a good solid coating. But I mean, if they're the only bits I've got to redo, I'm pretty happy about that. Righto, so that's come up really clean. So paint strip, and then we've used the heat gun along this edge. Now, I really want to pull this skin off because I want to fix this off the car, be a whole lot easier, and I want to really find out what's going on here with this rust. When it had the paint on it, I wasn't sure about the process because this top edge has got this extra piece on it because it's a lift gate rather than a ute tailgate. And it turns out, after we've taken all of the body sealer and stuff they had on it, that's got this little lip that's actually just separate, and it's spot welded on from the back. You can see here these spots. So that just holds this little lip on. That what I'm looking to do now is we'll remove that, and then sitting under that is the normal skin like you'd have on a ute. And then unfortunately for us, it's got this bronze from the factory, and you'll see that on a lot of this model car, this era, where they just put that on. So when we go to take this skin off, I would think that I'll sand that edge off and leave this bit behind because it's really difficult to work with, and it doesn't appear to have any spot welds in the back. So we'll be able to pull that lip up all the way around, take the skin off, repair the dent, make sure that rust is not on the inside, and we'll be able to strip the rest of it off. One of the things I would suggest is if you're doing this sort of work, it's really worth paint stripping rather than grinding, and because we can see now where our spot welds are on the inside. There's obviously a brace in there, but also we can tell along here that there are no spot welds, and if there were spots like they are down here, you would see it a whole lot easier. So I often see people putting stuff up on Facebook and things where they're working on a panel and it's still painted and they're trying to work on it and panel beat it and strip it. So much better if you can get the paint off it. It enables you to see what you've got in front of you and work through it. So we'll strip this as well once it's apart. So yeah, next job is to get the skin off. Righto, so seeing we're actually starting to prep these tailgates. So my plan is to get these straightened up, organised, so I can put them on the car, make sure my body lines are right, if I need to do gaps and stuff. So I've dragged the box of goodies out that we put together when this all came apart, and I've just taken the hinges and all the screws and all out because I really need to get those cleaned up, because when I go to put it together, I don't want to be working with all this rusty rubbish. So my plan is to, we'll get them hinges paint stripped, and I've just started wire wheeling these. So we're going from sort of rust. They're not too bad. They're not actually overly corroded. So I've just been putting those on my trusty stick here, so I've just got the nut welded in there, put that on there, and then I've got 2 wire wheels. This one's the one I class as a lighter one. It's getting a bit worn down now on the smaller one, and then this one here is a bit heavier, a bit more brutal. So I like to do threads and stuff on the small one, and then if I choose to get rid of some of the stuff like this here, I'll probably go on the big one. So I'm just going to keep cleaning those up, and then I'm going to put it in some of this. So I haven't used it yet. So this is made by the same people that do that gel that I've been using, the blue gel. So I'm just going to put some of that in there and mix it up. It's 5 to 1 with water, and I'll bring you the results and see how that goes. So that'll take off what's left of the rust in the bits I can't get to with the wire wheel. Righto, so I spent about an hour cleaning up all them bolts. So some of those, like I mean that one there really doesn't need to go in the solution, but I'll chuck them all in, and I've run these ones over the big wire wheel, take the bulk of the rubbish off them, and what I'll do now is we'll paint strip those, and I'll put these in this rust remover, and that'll get in all the back of the threads and all. We'll see how that goes. So the hinges, I decided to get a bit carried away and clean up all the edges. So they were pretty much a pressed fit, you know, with all the outsides weren't very nice. So I've just run around with those with the linisher. So I just started on a 40 grit and then went to 120 and then put the Scotch-Brite on them. And the idea is just to clean them up, so they'll still be painted, but I was just looking to get a better finish on them. It's a little bit like that, won't be a show car, but it's probably going to turn into one. So they're the bottom hinges. The top hinges, they had a very light coat of black paint on them, so I've just put some paint stripper on those. And I would say, looking at this, the actual colour of this, I'd say, is a very light zinc coating. Very much like the coating they use on the lock plates. It's got that sort of olive green look. So I can leave those like that now, and the idea is to be able to bolt it all in and make sure it all fits nice, and then clean things up if I want to go a bit further. Now the bolts I was doing earlier, I've put them in that solution. So first of all I wire wheeled them, got them all looking pretty good, which I filmed I'm sure this morning. And now they've been in that solution for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. And they appear to have taken away any of the rust that was up under the heads and stuff where I couldn't get with the wire wheel. And I ended up deciding to run over and get a new wire wheel, because as the wheels wear out, they get a little bit hard on the surface, so you get this sort of round look up to the wire wheel. So I went and picked up a new one, and that bolt there now has been in the solution, and then I've given it a quick buzz on that wire wheel, and that's now just sitting in some water to take that solution off. And my plan now is to dry those all out together, and I'm going to paint those with that the black epoxy, which is quite thin, and I'm looking to put that on there just to keep them, stop them surface rusting while we do our assembly. And then once I've got it all together, I'll make up my mind what I'll actually coat them with, but I'm pretty sure they'll just be painted. So they've been in that solution. So that one there, you can sort of see under the head a little bit, it looks a little bit brownish. So all I'm doing then is putting it on here. And the reason I went and got a new wheel is those little fine wires will go back up underneath, and you can see a little bit of pitting on the surface, so that's where the rust was. And because this has got these little wires hanging off the edge on the wheel, that enables me to get them up underneath the washer. So, you know, there's probably a few hours to get all of those bolts for the whole tailgate assembly cleaned up, but I know when I go to do my assembly they're going to fit nice, and when I go to paint them, the paint will stick and we'll get a good job. with so much time invested in the jobs we do, I'm looking for a product that can stand up to the test of time, but also work for me here and now. And I've found that PPG and Mirka fit that bill for me. If you're looking for their products, go to ppgrefinish.com.au, click on the distributor link there, and that'll take you to where you can buy the product. We use it all the time, and I love the product, and I've been with it for over 25 years. So I've decided to take the skin off. I'll get Darren to take the skin off. So I showed you before this top edge here. So we've got this little bit added on. So obviously the factory's used the tailgate skin from a ute, and then they've made this little piece up for the lift gate. So we're just going to remove that because they're pretty much spot welded on and then just put sealer both sides, and it looks pretty rusty underneath. So we're just going to drill those out. Now Darren's got his extension bit going. And you can see there that that's going to release quite good, and you can see the rust actually falling out down in here, so it's going to be a bit average behind it by the look of it. So what I've been doing is I've had Steve stripping the other panel, and then I've been cleaning up the hinges, and I give those a coat of the black epoxy and all of those bolts. And I've done that so that we can, when we start putting it back together, we can assemble it with some nice clean bolts and just see what sort of a fit we're going to have. So that's why you need to split things. So you could clean it all up and have it looking real nice, and then when you go to actually paint it, some of that would start bleeding back, and in 5 years' time you'd go, oh, I've got a rust bubble. Be interesting to see how much of that is rust and how much of it is red dust from Nyngan, where the car come from. It's interesting that whole bottom edge has got no spot welds in it. There's really no fixed process to this. This is about making it up as you go, trying to do the least amount of damage to the panels while you're trying to get that back up. So you normally don't have this big edge to lever off, so he's been able to do that. Can't believe how nice that skin is on the inside. We stripped that yesterday. Come off in one go with normal paint stripper, and it looks brand new. Amazing. Might have got a bit lucky with the bronze. Started to come up. So the bronze is a bit of a problem because we haven't been able to find a way to get it out because it's designed to weep back under to seal it. So we'll cut that, probably take the edge off here and leave this behind, and then make some of that back up afterwards. But making pretty good progress. So where this was spot welded on, he's actually drilled out the skin now because that spot would have went all the way through, and that's now released. So you just got to get yourself in somewhere. He's got himself in behind now here. We'll get it pretty much released like that all the way around and make sure there's nothing holding it, and then we can start bending it back up a bit more. Biggest thing when you're doing something like this is not to rush. Don't try and pull it all the way up on one edge. You've got to work your way backwards and forwards, a little bit of patience, and limit the amount of stretching of this edge here, because if you go along and stretch all that, when you go to put it back on, it's got to go back into itself then. So. And then we need to buy another pair of those, Darren. These here used to be quite wide, but we cut them down for a job, and now they're a bit narrow. But the wider ones probably would be better for this job, but we cut them up for something else. So it's all about improvising. Well, what a nightmare this is turning into being. So, you know, you'd think fairly easy to come off, but we've struggled along and we're just about there. So when they've spot welded this little return edge on, that spot weld has gone all the way through. So I'm thinking that it wouldn't have got through all the panels, but it's actually welded the frame to the skin now. So Darren's just going along and drilling all those out. I managed to use the die grinder to grind these areas up to get us to get the skin off. But then it didn't want to release, so we ended up making a tool to go along the edge. That blue handled one, if it's there, Darren, somewhere. So I sacrificed another scraper. Tried to bend it first and it broke, so I heated it up with the oxy, put that in underneath and knocked that along to release any glues. Still didn't want to release, so where this lock plate here is, there's a bracket on the inside that we'll see shortly that was glued to the skin, and then there's a reinforcing panel right through the top that was glued to the skin, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I just thought I'd show you where we're up to now with the spot welds. And this, Darren and I pretty much agree, is probably the hardest skin we've ever taken off, but we're nearly there. Righto, so after a great amount of effort, we've released it. So these were the big dobs here that were holding on the lock braces. And then this bit here, this is the standard problem with latex BOSSXC, is this sealer, whatever they used, and you can almost see it looks porous. It either holds the moisture or it just eats away from the inside out. So I think what we're going to end up needing is a new skin, because I'd imagine now, oh, it doesn't look as bad as I thought it might have, because on the other side, where are we going to tip all that to? So if we have a look at there, all these here are dead in line with where that was. So if this is not available, like they can buy these skins, but if they weren't available, we'd weld those up with a TIG and then move forward. But we'll clean it up and see where we go. And there's a good chance now, we'll give that a wash. A lot of this is just dirt, but I'm thinking that it may need to go to the blasters to get a blast. But I'll make those decisions in a minute, and then we'll keep going. Righto, so we might just get rid of some of this and see what we got. Doesn't look too bad, I've seen worse, but I'd normally use electric heat gun, but for some reason it's decided to stop working. So I'm going to give that a clean up and see whether we're going to save the skin or whether I need to chase up Rare Spares or someone and get a new one.
Okay, so on this tailgate there was a rusty section just in this area here. This is the piece that come out of it. You can see that was all rusted in between the two panels. It was pretty crusty. So I've cut it out. That was like that, and then that was on the other side. So I've cut it out, replace it with a new bit of steel. Yeah, just to get rid of the crustiness in between the two panels. There doesn't seem to be anything else on the tailgate, just bar this section. So we'll weld it in and clean it up and see how it goes. All right, so we've welded those two pieces in both sides. So that one's been welded in as well as the other side. So now what we've got to do is just clean it up, give it a bit of a trim, probably a spot weld in the centre to hold it together, and that's that rust repair done.
Righto, so we've got a couple of bits ready for some epoxy. So the Deltron DP616. So that panel we didn't split because it was really mint all around these back edges, no sign of any sort of weeping. There was a little bit of a repair we did one side. Can't even see where he's been now, this one here. And that was where the rubber had obviously leaked, and it was just rusting here on the edge, not inside. And in fact, inside the panel is super clean. One thing we did do is I got Darren to weld these up. So that was just an opening for that to come through from the inside. And I've just welded that up so that once we get it ready for paint, that'll all mould in looking nice. The inside of this one, I've cleaned up and got rid of the majority of the rubbish off it, and I'll just make sure I get plenty of paint on that now and seal it up. I mean, it's never going to be an issue in my lifetime. And the inside of that was just absolute mint. It's amazing that there was no damage on that tailgate, and it is the original one. So I've taken these little pieces out of here where the threads go in, and I've dipped those, so once I get everything painted I can put them back in, and I've ordered a new skin for that, so that should only be a week or so and we'll have that and we can put that back together and start trial fitting it all. So I'll get my gear on and yeah, get into it. Two nice coats and that's looking mint. So that can sit and wait for a bit now till that skin turns up, and then this one's just as good. Hopefully that when I get to put it back on in a few weeks' time, the gaps won't be too bad and we won't have to start welding things up to make it fit nice. So time will tell. Right, back onto the body. So this is one of those jobs that I've been avoiding, I think, and the fact that I've got Darren for a couple of days will muck in and do it. So I've got him welding and I'm about to do some clean up and grinding on the other side. So I had that masked off so that we didn't actually get any paint in there because that would make life a bit more difficult. So I've just taken the tape off, run a wire wheel along there, and what we're going to do now is you'll see what we've got over here is going along with the welder and just using a spot process, so like 1, 2, 3, cool with air, 1, 2, 3, cool with air. I was concerned about how this was going to be through here, and if anything it's better now than it was, and I think possibly what's happened is it's actually pulled that metal a little bit and just tightened it up. We've got a little high spot here, but we did do some repairs in here, but I'll knock that down and I'm pleasantly surprised the minimum amount of movement in that panel. So I'm going to run a 40 grit along the top of that, make it a little bit smoother, and then I'm going to work out how I'm going to mark a straight line so I can run a couple of different style discs along there to get my nice body line back in there. So the idea here is to keep your heat, a fair bit of heat, but minimal amount of time on the weld so that you've got good penetration. We want to try and get the weld right back into that groove, but we don't want too much heat. So 3 or 4 spots, cool it down, 3 or 4 spots, cool it down. It's a long process, but it minimises the warpage, and when I go to grind it up, we'll get a really good finish on it. Just let me do the other side. So while he's been doing that, I've put this bit of timber along here with some tape. I've found the centre, marked that, and now I'm running just a 1mm blade on the 4-inch grinder, that one. So I've just run that along there now to create my line, and then I'm going to use a sanding disc to actually sand back into that line so I can get that factory look back, but it'll be all seam welded. So it's been all go. So I've ran that 1mm blade along the timber. Now I've sanded up to that groove, and then I'll show you the other side in a minute because I've got the top sanded as well. So it's a little bit time consuming like all these things, but I'm sure it'll pay dividends in the long run. And while I've been sanding, Darren's been up to other things. So you can see there now, I've got that nice factory looking groove. Really happy with the way that's coming out. And what I've used there is normal 4-inch grinder, but with a 60 grit. So just a 60 pad, and I can trim a bit off those, but ideally you need a new one. So I've burnt through about 5 or 6 of those getting to where I am, and I've done that to keep a nice sharp edge to follow that 1mm groove. So we just, I'll keep working away with that. Righto, so a little job I've been putting off, another one I've been putting off. So today's the day, all the put off jobs are getting done. So I'm pretty sure we welded a little patch in here where there was a bit of rust when we took the gutters off. And it's a little bit full, it's just a bit round. So I've put this spoon in from behind, it's going to act as my dolly. I'm going to put a nice cherry red here. Well, damn, we've lost our sound again. I don't know what's going on with the sound, but I'm going to do a little voiceover on this. So the old heat shrink process, what I'm talking about there is that when you do the red hot, it grows, you can see the metal come up. I'm going to put, because I've got the dolly behind, I'm then going to work around that with the hammer and try and bring the metal back into itself. And then when I put the water on it, that'll then quench it and actually tighten it right up. So the oxy on there, round and round, bring up the center, and then I'm hitting around that so that I can force the metal back into itself, and then a couple of taps in the middle normally, try and get it flat, and then I'll go and find my rag with a bit of water and I quench that. And if we had some sound, you'd hear it actually, you know, it's red hot, so it pulls the metal into itself. And now I'll just check how that's gone. So normally that'll go a little bit too far in. Get your hammer out, you can hear there, see what I'm doing there, it's actually pulling that metal together. So I'll just check how that's gone. It ended up a little, that area was probably right. You can see now, what am I going to do now? So I'll go up behind there, I'm just going to try and tap down the surrounding area a bit. And then see whether it's going to oil can or not. So it's just holding on that edge there, so I'll put a dolly in there and give that a whack probably. Where you going, Howard? Come on. Right, so that little ridge there, that's what I'm doing. So I'm just going to get a chisel now and knock that in a bit. So that body line runs down, and then I've just lost it a bit where we've put the rust repair in. So the trick there is not to be frightened of what you're doing. You just got to look at it and work out what's happening and see what you got to do to get that metal back into the shape. the old steel ruler again, check how I'm going for straightness. And then I've probably got a couple of highs there, so I think sound comes back again now. I think we've got the sound problem fixed, but we'll see how we go. Righto, so I've ended up doing that big shrink there. Another one here was a bit of a high where probably we've been welding. And then these ones, I've just done a few little ones to pull it, to take the oil canning out of it. So it's nice and tight. When I run the ruler down nice and straight, so I'll hit that with the Scotchy now, and that'll be pretty much this side, getting going close to being ready to put some primer on it, which is good. Righto, so if you've tried to absorb all of that, you might be thinking, wow, a bit more info on getting that shell off might have been good, getting the skin off the shell. We actually, way back a couple of years ago, we did 3 episodes on repairing a bonnet. And if you go in there, it'll actually explain, and have a look at that, it'll explain all the different tools we're using and how we made them and how it works. So go back, I'm sure it's just called repairing a bonnet, and there's 3 parts to that. I'll actually get to finish that one day. Someone asked me the other day about it, because I haven't done the 4th one, putting it back together. But obviously now we're going to need it, so I'll do that. In relation to the tailgate, we got it all off. I've got it all cleaned up and sealed in epoxy. I ended up doing it here. Most of that brown on the inside was paint and dust. So we cleaned it all up, got it in epoxy, really solid, no rust. Virtually no damage even, which is really great. I've sourced a skin for it, so I'm going to put a new skin on it, and I've ordered a couple of those to put in stock as well. So if anyone's looking for a skin, we'll have those. And I've also organised to have some of these made. So this is the bit that goes on this top edge. So I've got some of those coming, we'll have them in stock. So if you're doing a panel van, you need some bits, we'll be able to help. In relation to the body, I ended up using the TIG just to do a few spots. Had a couple of little pinholes in the MIG welding, so I've just gone along with the TIG. That's what these bits are, just to make sure that I've got no pinholes. And now I need to get that tidied up and get it into some epoxy. So, fairly wide-ranging show. Hope you've enjoyed it again, and we'll keep bringing you more. We should be moving on to the doors now, so we'll get them stripped out and cleaned up, and we'll make sure we get some footage on that. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you haven't done it, subscribe to the channel, just helps what we're doing. If you click the like button, and if you've got a comment to make, I'll always get back to you. So hope you enjoy Astill Design, and we'll see you on the next one.